Hello and welcome to another An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about Swamp Women from 1956. I think I may have said 1959 in the last video. 1956 is the actual year of production. This is a Roger Corman film. Roger Corman made a number of women criminal films, probably because he recognised the allure of a bad girl to the average male film goer. Swamp Women, or also known as Swamp Diamonds or Cruel Swamp, is one of his earliest efforts in this genre. And it tracks the efforts of the New Orleans police to recover a fortune in stolen diamonds. The only ones who know the location of said diamonds are the gang who stole them. This presents a problem because the men of the gang are all dead, executed for their crimes, and all of their girlfriends are doing time in the local jail, and therefore unlikely to go anywhere near the diamonds. Thus, the plan is hatched to send a policewoman undercover into the jail as an inmate, where her job is to help the criminal trio break out, go with them to wherever the diamonds are, and then signal the watching police to move in and arrest the bad guys, or bad gals, as it may be. Naturally, this plan is going to hit a few snags along the way, whether it be the handsome oil man who ends up as their prisoner, the swamp's ubiquitous alligators, or the women's own rivalries and tempers. I mean, there wouldn't be much of a story if everything went to plan, right? It'd be over in 10 minutes. Not really what you want. Now, a lot of Roger Corman's films have wacky production stories behind them, and this is no exception. Apparently, the hotel that the cast and crew were staying in appears to have been near derelict, with barely any running water and beds that collapsed on them. But that's not going to be a focus of this video. Let's dive in instead and talk about what works and what doesn't in this little film. And spoiler, it's more the latter than the former. Okay, so first of all, there's a lot of talking in this movie. A huge amount of screen time is spent on people discussing things happening, while comparatively little is spent on showing us those things actually happen. This is definitely a weakness in the film. Repeatedly talking about stuff can draw attention to the fact that said stuff is not actually being depicted. It's, hey, look over there at that big fight. They are really hurting one another. And it's not like, and on top of that, it's not like the writing or the delivery is polished enough to make all the chitter-chatter particularly compelling. Now, I do understand why the film is like this, of course. Action scenes take a lot more time and effort, and therefore money, to film than dialogue scenes do. And, Roger Corman was always very much of the never spend a dime you don't have to school of filmmaking. More action might make the film better, but it would definitely cost more. So let's not do it. It does detract from the film, of course. But that wasn't necessarily... making the best film possible was never his objective. Making the best film possible for a very, very tiny budget was. Now, while most of the hostility between the women remains verbal, because the film does like to talk, their rivalries do sometimes turn physical. And these fights, though technically not very well staged from a, quality of choreography perspective, are a refreshing change of pace from all the talking and bickering. And I also very much appreciated that they are very much in the mold of fist-swinging John Wayne-style brawls. There's no sexy catfighting going on here, where two women just kind of roll around flashing their legs at us. It's nice to see them avoid that usual exploitation trope. I suspect that's not an intentional avoidance, necessarily. I think it's probably just coincidental that they avoided, that they gave us sort of reasonably... intense fight scenes rather than sexy time fighting, but whether it's intentional or not, I'll take it. So yes, the refreshingly punchy fight scenes, pun fully intended, are definitely the best part of this film. And the last thing I want to talk about is that Swamp Women has something of a reputation. It's one of the 50 films listed in the 1978 book The Worst Movies of All Time, and it is also under one of the alternative titles, Swamp Diamonds, featured on an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Now, if you're not familiar with that show, it's basically a group of people watching a bad film and snarking about it. In other words, this is a film with a notorious reputation for being bad. And is that reputation deserved? Well, somewhat. I mean, the film is, kind of trite and dull. It has a stretched out plot, and there's a distinct lack of action to enliven things. So it's a bit tedious all in all, and being boring is, in my mind, one of the worst film crimes to commit. But is it 50 worst movies of all time levels of bad? No, not even close, frankly. It's certainly guilty of overpromising. What with the posters talk about weird adventure and flaming passions, which are not really in evidence. But, 50 worst movies of all time, it's probably not even in the 50 worst movies that Roger Corman ever made, because he's produced over 500, and some of them have been utter rubbish, way worse than this, let alone the 50 worst of all. But it is, if you want to say you have seen a movie that has been kind of touted as one of the worst movies of all time, then you can watch Swamp Women and tick that off the list. You can also, there are other movies, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, for instance, which I've previously talked about, was also on that list. But yeah, that's Swamp Women, a decidedly average, mediocre, cheapy, wannabe exploitation film with no actual real exploitation in it. Next time, I'm going to talk about the 2011 Vampires vs. Martial Arts mashup Priest. So that'll be next time. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and thanks for watching.